Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 5 Drinks to Midnight, Quarantine Edition. Today we're talking to Stephen Randles from Origin Spirits. But before we do, like and subscribe.
Stephen Randles, thank you so much for joining us. 5 Drinks to Midnight, 5 questions, 5 drinks, midnight, whatever comes first. Thanks so much. How you doing?
Doing very well, yeah. I live here in the city centre of Dublin, Ireland, and the pubs are reopen. So a lot of people are rejoicing and celebrating about that fact. I had my first pint of Guinness in a pub last night in a very long time, and that was a very nice experience. So there's a great atmosphere back around the city. It was a bit like a morgue there for a while, so great to see people out being socially distant and safe, but having a good time again.
Excellent.
I think was needed.
Excellent. So what's our first drink?
So I've got my first drink here in this beautiful 2 a glass that you sent me, my Whiskey Wednesdays 2 a glass.
Excellent.
And interestingly, we are going to be sipping a vodka neat. So what we're going to be sipping is you're getting the bottle as well as I am.
Yep, there we go.
Kalak single malt vodka. So one of the only single malt vodkas in the world. The reason we're sipping this neat is that this actually has a beautiful character. It's got a beautiful flavor, but not from anything that's been artificially added. Flavor from the actual distillation, from the actual grain. So we use 100% Irish malted barley to create this unique single malt vodka. It's then traditionally copper pot distilled, a homage to the Irish distillation and distilling whiskey. So it's 4 times copper pot distilled, and you'll see we've tried to capture as much of that Irish malted barley flavour in the actual glass as possible. And that's the DNA that transverses our entire portfolio, that all of our products are made using 100% Irish malted barley. So this has been distilled up to 96% alcohol, so it is technically neutral. But as you'll see, Tim, when you're nosing and sipping and savouring, there's so much aromas, there's so much flavours going on here. On the nose, there's real creamy, biscuity, chocolatey style flavours. Sandra?
Vodka, cheers.
On the palate, real earthy, biscuity, chocolate malt, Malteser style characteristics. You'd never think you were drinking a vodka.
No, not at all. And you're right, it's very chocolatey. Like that, you get a lot of, like that is that, and again, not a question yet for our first question.
No, not an official question.
Not an official one, but is that because it's been distilled so many times, or like is that different for vodka?
So generally you see on vodka that vodka is distilled multiple times. So vodka brands will probably brag about the amount of times that they've distilled their vodka, and they'll say it's been filtered multiple times as well. So you normally see like 30 times distilled, 30 times filtered to be the most pure, most smooth, most easy drinking vodka. Essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to make a neutral spirit. They're essentially just trying to get the ethanol. But we took a completely different approach, that we use only 4 distillations, and we use a copper pot still as opposed to a column still, which really captures and encapsulates that flavour. And then we only filter once through a light activated carbon filter, which really just gets rid of the impurities and keeps as much of that character inside in the glass as possible. So it goes quite against the grain when it comes to vodkas. So much so, a lot of whiskey bloggers have started blogging about it, saying that this is the whiskey drinkers vodka, which was huge validation for us as a company. The Single Malt Alliance, actually, which you might be familiar with him over there in the US, he's the biggest single malt whiskey blogger in the world, and the only product that isn't whiskey that he's ever blogged about was our single malt vodka, Kalak.
Oh, that's well, cheers.
On to again.
That's so good. All right, so question 1. Your background's a little crazy. So from the social stalking that we've done, you've started a rugby academy, you're a brand manager, an auditor, head of marketing. How did you get started in the spirits business?
Well, I suppose, yeah, I've done quite a lot of things in a short space of time. I suppose growing up in Cork, you can't but love whiskey. Like I grew up in the fumes of the Jameson distillery, 10 minutes from the Middleton distillery, just down the road from me in County Cork. And I suppose I've worked indirectly in the spirits industry for the bones of 14 years, in that my aunt owns a bar in a little town called Castletown Bear in West Cork. And the second the bell used to ring for the summer holidays, I used to hop on the first bus down to Castletown Bear and spend my summers down there bartending. I remember Powers was the drink of choice down there for all of the lads sitting at the bar. I think out of the entry-level Irish blends, it's probably got the highest pot still content. But then when I went into college, I did a commerce degree in UCC, But while I was doing that, I was quite entrepreneurial, and I think this is where your stalking comes into play. In that I was involved, I was the auditor of the Business Society in UCC, and ran a lot of the different events, nights out for college, and then got involved with a lot of bars and nightclubs in Cork City, and at a young age was managing and running the marketing for an awful lot of different bars and venues around Cork City, which was quite an experience, so much so that I opened my own nightclub at one stage, which was called Beta House. It was kind of based on the American fraternity system. It was run by the students, for the students. The fatal flaw being for that business that students have no money and would spend absolutely nothing when they came into it. So that was a good business learning for me at the time. But I suppose I always had my eye on the spirits industry. I remember one particular lecture in UCC, an international business lecture. I think it was on a Friday morning. We'd all been out the night before. He'd lost the attention of the class, and I think he took a different tact and looked around and he said, "Right guys, hands up here, who wants to be rich?" And every single one of us in the class, that caught our attention. We put our hands up. And he nearly put me back to sleep when he said the next thing. He said, "Well, you can get rich in the Irish food and drink industry in one of two ways." He said, "Number one, you can go and sell baby infant formula in China." Now, as of yet in my life, I have no need for baby infant formula, and it doesn't interest me too much. It didn't interest me much at 18 or 19 years of age. He said, "Number two, he said you can go and sell Irish whiskey in the United States." Now, this piqued my interest with my graw for whiskey. So I kind of had an eye on wanting to work for a supplier, having worked on the bar and nightclub side of things. I wanted to get into the spirit side of things, and I went into a sales role, went into numerous different roles, and I kind of had my eye on the spirits industry. And an opportunity came up to represent two fantastic Cork spirit brands, Calaxinoma Vodka being one of them here, and Hyde Irish Whiskey was the other brand, another fantastic Cork whiskey brand. And I went out and I represented them as their USA brand ambassador for 2 years, living out of Chicago, Illinois, but managing 34 different states across the USA, which was a fantastic opportunity. And after that, when I finished up that particular role, I came on full-time with Patrick Shelley at Origin Spirits, working on this beautiful portfolio that you see behind me here. So it was a very busy in my teenage years and in my early 20s, working in numerous different roles across various different industries. But this was the industry I always had my eye on, and this is where I wanted to be, and I'm delighted that I finally got it.
All right, well, that's question one, so super easy. All right, on to drink two.
So this time I have my beautiful Whiskey Wednesdays 2 a glass again, and it's not a whiskey, it's a single malt gin. So next up we are drinking Orna Brac single malt gin. So it is a 5 times copper pot distilled single malt gin with 5 botanicals. So the botanicals that you have in here is you have lemon verbena, you have Douglas fir pine needles, unwaxed organic lemon peel, you have angelica root, and you have the juniper berries. But each of these botanicals have to do a stringent interview process with our base. So we use a 100% single malt base. Now this would be quite different to how most gins would be constructed. Most gins generally use a neutral base, a column distilled neutral base that is quite odorless, quite flavourless. They want their botanicals to talk. Whereas with Orna Brac, we wanted to lift up and accentuate that Irish malted barley single malt base. So the base will be very similar to the taste profile you would get from Calaxinoma Vodka, an awful lot of kind of chocolate malt, kind of biscuity, brioche, earthy style flavour characteristics. So the 5 botanicals we chose in there, it was almost like putting a cocktail together using Calaxinoma Vodka as the base. They didn't just have to fit together with the other botanicals, but they had to really lift up and accentuate that Irish single malt base spirit. So really, really interesting. The one thing you'll notice about this when you're sipping it, Tim, is that the fact that we've copper pot distilled it, we put the actual botanicals into the still, and distilled it the 5th time the botanicals in the still. There's a real oily viscosity to this liquid, almost akin to like an old pot still Irish whiskey. Think like one of the Middletons from like 1992. Real oily, syrupy style viscosity to it, and you can almost taste the fats from the actual botanicals itself. So really interesting, really different, really palatable neat because it's very smooth on entry as well. So listen, let's launch it.
Awesome, cheers. Oh, that smells wonderful on the nose. That's just. It's almost like a cocktail. You're right. Like it.
So very few gin companies actually make a gin with the mission in mind of actually creating a neat sipping gin. A lot of them think, how is this going to pair with a tonic? And tonic is quite verbose and aggressive as a mixer. It's full of quinines and sugars. So a lot of gins, when you sip them neat, they pack a punch because they're made to pack a punch through a tonic. Whereas we were very conscious we wanted to make the best smooth sipping gin possible. So it's very smooth on entry, And then like a whiskey, the flavors start to unravel on your palate. And it's when you could really sit down next to a nice warm fire, pour this into a tumbler glass, and you can really get into and explore each individual botanical, because there is such a low amount of botanicals, which was a conscious decision. We wanted to keep it quite minimalist, so that you could really get into and explore and taste each and every single one of those botanical flavour characteristics. And the lead botanical is probably those Douglas fir pine needles, which come from the forest next to the distillery in West Cork, and that gives you kind of a taste profile, almost like the aromas you smell when you're walking through a forest on a wet, rainy day. So a really stunning and really unique, interesting gin. And interestingly enough, this is actually similar to Kalak. A lot of whiskey bloggers are blogging about this, saying this is the whiskey drinker's gin. The fact that it's made on the traditional copper pot stills, made from barley, has a lot of whiskey similarities in terms of base flavour characteristics, and in the way that you can actually drink it with that oiliness and that smoothness on entry that the flavours unravel.
Awesome. All right, well, so on to question 2 then. You guys have this wonderful motto of farm to bottle. Where do you see like the next 15, 20, 25 years of the spirits industry going?
I do think terroir would be a big element and be a big part of it. Consumers are looking for a bit more transparency in the drinks industry. In the past, they wouldn't have cared as much, where did the base grain for this whiskey come from? We use 100% Irish malted barley to create all of our products. It's all sustainably grown and sourced locally from farmers in the southeast of Ireland. I think organic grains will be something that will be very big. As time goes on, people will look for more so organic grains. We couldn't find any organic farmers who were producing enough organic, say, barley to produce our products in an organic way. But I think that'll be definitely something that will be definitely a topic in the whiskey industry and the spirits industry going forward. Definitely, I think localized kind of Irish grains. I was shocked when I started out in this industry to find out that some of my favourite single malt Irish whiskies were actually using French barley to create their single malt Irish whiskies. So I definitely think consumers will be looking for local Irish grains. It'll be really interesting to see the different mash bill varieties that will come out. I'm really looking forward to seeing more rye and more oats being utilised and produced in Irish whiskey. Having lived in the United States, where rye is predominantly used in a lot of whiskies over there, I love it as a grain, so I'm really excited to see different distilleries exploring different grain varieties. I know they're a bit strapped by the Irish Whiskey Technical File at the moment. There's a lot of talk about that being revised in the future, but rye is definitely a grain that I'd love to see more of being used in Irish whiskey. And I think definitely, the hot topic at the moment is Waterford whiskey with their single origin, single farm releases. Having tasted through the range, I can see a difference in each individual spirit. They're definitely barley forward, and each one has a different kind of grain style characteristic shining through in it. I know the guys down in Clonakilty are doing really fascinating stuff where they're bringing back an old barley variety hundreds of years ago and growing it on their own farm near the Galley Head in Clonakilty, which is fascinating because I think the old barley varietals, you would never see any of those being farmed today because they're just not, they wouldn't produce as much output, they wouldn't be economical for farmers to be producing them, but I bet you they create a beautiful, oily, viscous, character forward style distillate. So I think we're going to see some really fascinating stuff coming down the line in terms of the terroir element. We've taken a slightly different approach on our whiskey. We started to explore the maritime landscape and the maritime terroir. And seaweed is a maritime crop, and it is very much affected by its landscape, very much affected by its terroir. And what we've found is even seaweed from different parts of Ireland will have a different flavour characteristic. Seaweed from different countries will have a different flavour characteristic. And we're very happy that we're working with sustainably hand-harvested organic Irish seaweed here in Ireland. I know in other countries they need to farm their seaweed and they use kind of enzymes and different produce to actually enhance and grow the seaweeds, and that all affects flavour. So it's really fascinating. That's something that we're exploring in terms of the maritime side of things. But I'm sure with all these new distilleries popping up here in Ireland, I think there's 31 new distilleries in Ireland at the moment, 31 distilleries in Ireland with a further, I think, 18 or 20 being built, that we're definitely going to see a lot of different distilleries looking to explore different varieties of terroir to kind of find their niche and put their stamp on the Irish whiskey industry, and I'm really excited to see where it all goes.
All right, so on to question 3. What are we drinking?
So we have one of the most unique spirits I've ever come across in my life in our glass here for number 3. What we have is the world's first ever peated vodka. So we are sipping Kalak Peat Cask single malt vodka. So, as I kind of alluded to earlier on Kalak single malt vodka, our goal when creating Kalak was to bring as much character and flavour as we could into the actual vodka category. And as I said, Kalak became known as the whiskey drinkers vodka, but a lot of whiskey drinkers falling in love with it. And it was quite a disruptor in the vodka category, as I mentioned. It kind of goes against the grain because vodka is meant to be tasteless, flavourless, odourless, neutral. So we kind of thought about it and we said, you know, what else can we do here to add character and add flavour to the vodka category? And we didn't want to go down the route of artificially adding flavour like any of these cherry or berry flavoured style vodkas. And again, everything that we do, we try to utilise as much of the Irish landscape, the Irish terroir as possible. And us being an island nation and us being climate that we have here in Ireland, we don't grow very many lemons or many fruits, but what we do have in abundance is peat. I think 1/6 of our island is actually peat or turf. So we have a rich history in peated single malt whiskies, so we thought, why not peat an actual vodka? Now, there was no maltster at the time that would actually peat barley for us on the island, so we had to take a very unique and innovative approach in that we actually peat the casks. So we take peat from a local bog in Glengarriff in West Cork, and we use it to light a fire. What we do is we lower virgin American oak casks down over this peat fire, and we smoke and char the inside of the casks roughly about 20 seconds. And then what we do is we turn the cask around and we pour in our single malt vodka, Kalak, our 4 times copper pot distilled single malt vodka. And we let that rest for further 3 to 4 months, depending on the time of year. And what it does is it picks up those beautiful smoke style flavors and characteristics very well in that short aging period, because it's a more, say, blank canvas style spirit than a whiskey would be going into those casks. So it really picks them up, but in a very delicate, elegant manner. It's still very much so a vodka, with a very interesting smoky peat style, meaty, sweet peat style characteristics. So that is drink number 3, Kalak Peat Cask Single Malt Vodka. Cheers. So you'll see on entry, you definitely get the peat flavours up front, but like Orna Brac, flavours unravel in your mouth, and mid-palate that creaminess really kicks in, and at the end I get kind of sweet, kind of caramel style flavours, a little bit of meatiness. I like to say that it's a smoky caramel ice cream with a touch of bacon sprinkled on top.
No, that's exactly. That's what I was almost thinking, that it's very bacony. Like that is so interesting.
So the idea here was to create a smoky style drink that, say, peated Scotch drinkers would still find peaty enough for them, for say someone who doesn't drink smoky style drinks, that it wouldn't be overly peaty, wouldn't be Octomore style smoke characteristics to it. So we tried to find that perfect balance, and we like to think that we've achieved it.
No, and now, like, that's all I keep thinking about is that's a good candied, like, that's a baked, like, candied bacon. Like, that is just, that's like Sunday morning. Like, that's, damn, that's good. Okay.
Well, one thing that used to outrage me, Tim, and I know that you hang around in some of the top cocktail bars in New York, well, before so lockdown madness kicked in, but you go to some of the top mixology bars around the world, and if they want to add a smoky element to their cocktail, what a lot of them do is they take a peated Scotch whiskey, maybe like a Lagavulin, a Freud, or a Ardbeg, and they use it to rinse the glass, and then they pour the whiskey down the drain. And I used to be sitting at the bars kind of going, what are you doing with that beautiful whiskey? I'll drink it, give it to me. But now they actually have a spirit that they can actually utilise to add a smoky element to their actual drink, which they don't need to pour down the drain. So we're delighted to be able to bring that to the mixology world.
That's amazing. Wow, that's just, again, 3 really crazy drinks that normally would never even consider, like, ordering, but, like, wow, like, just fully shocked, honestly. Like, that is, wow. Okay, so question 3. You talked a little bit about, like, whiskey bloggers blogging about each spirit, and each one being a Irish single malt spirit. Wouldn't it just be easier just to make whiskey? I mean, I guess that, like, that, what makes you guys want to do whiskey, like whiskey style vodka, whiskey style gin for whiskey drinkers? Like, where, like, I guess I'm just trying to, is it just to take over the world? I mean, like, what is the method to that madness?
So I suppose we're a small company of only 2 people, myself and the founder, Patrick Shelley. And that question, that story really begins with Patrick. So Patrick spent the bones of 20 years working for LVMH, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, mainly working on the Moet Hennessy side of things. He worked with some fantastic brands across the world, the likes of your Femorangis, your Ardbegs. And Patrick was based in Moscow in Russia. And tradition over there in the drinks industry is if you were to cement a partnership, that partnership wasn't cemented until you took your business counterpart out and you cheers that partnership over
На здоровье!
vodka, because that's what they drink predominantly in Moscow and Russia. And Patrick, being a man from Tipperary in Ireland who loved Tipple whiskey, couldn't understand or get his head around why people loved this tasteless, flavourless, odourless spirit that is vodka. So actually left his job in Moet Hennessy and moved back to Ireland with a goal in his mindset to try and create a vodka that he himself, a whiskey drinker and a wine lover, could actually drink something with character, something with complexity. And again, flavour, character and complexity, not from anything artificially added, but from the actual distillation, from the actual terroir. So Calaxinoma Vodka was very much our first product, and that pushed the boundaries in terms of what a vodka can be. That was predominantly set to be the only product in the portfolio. It was supposed to be a portfolio of just one product. And I suppose Patrick has come up with numerous different innovations and I suppose looked at different categories and said, how can we push the boundaries here further? And myself and Patrick have a conversation on the phone every single day we speak together. And in each of our conversations, we're trying to think of different things we could do in different spirit categories that would push the boundaries, that would be creative, but would also be premium. Nothing leaves the distillery unless we're happy with it and think that it's actually premium. Not that it's just unique or different or quirky. It has to be premium, it has to be world class. That's something that we put down as kind of a specification for any individual product. But the other products, they weren't really planned. They just kind of spiraled from Calaxinoma Vodka. Someone said to Patrick, you know, would you ever create a gin? Patrick said, no way, he'd never create a gin. And then he had an idea. You know, most gins are made from a neutral grain spirit base and use their main selling point is the different botanicals that they use. But 90% of what you're drinking when you drink gin is the actual base spirit. But nobody is actually doing anything with it. Well, some new companies are doing lots of interesting things with the base spirit. I know there's one Finnish company that do beautiful rye base to their gins, and there's other companies doing fantastic things. But Patrick thought, why not use the Rolls Royce of grains, Irish malted barley, to create a single malt gin using copper pot stills to try to capture as much flavour as possible. Kalak Peat Cask, that was an experiment that Patrick thought would be a really cool idea. He decided he loved it and he wanted the world to see it and wanted the world to try it. And we thought it would actually be a limited edition supplementary product to our single malt vodka Kalak, but people have absolutely grown to love it, and it's nearly got a cult following around the world, particularly in the mixology scene, so much so that it's now a full-time commercial product. And then Corry single malt Irish whiskey Atlantic Combo Seaweed Cask. Again, we said as a company that we would never do a whiskey. We said we were going to be single malt vodka, single malt gin, that's all we'd do, unless we could come up with an idea innovative enough that would fit in with our portfolio, that would be unique and interesting but premium and world class at the same time. And it wasn't on the horizons. Corry wasn't planned, it wasn't in the budgets, but myself and Patrick, we were actually at a whiskey festival and we'd actually had the idea of maybe enhancing Orna Brac with Seaweed in some way or manner, but we saw that it had been done before. And generally when we try to do something, we try to be innovative, we try to be a world's first. And we put the idea of Seaweed to bed. We actually had a whiskey show, sipping a whiskey together, myself and Patrick. And I don't know how it came up in the conversation. We just somehow went back to that conversation we had about seaweed gin. We said, what about influencing a whiskey with seaweed? Wouldn't that be fascinating? Now, Tim, we had no idea how we were going to go about doing this, and we set off into numerous different trials and exploring different seaweed varieties and different ways of enhancing whiskey with seaweed that would actually fit in with the Irish whiskey technical file. But it's a real exploration of passion, I suppose. We are spirit lovers first and foremost, and we want to drink spirits that have character, that have flavour, that come from the actual terroir. And I suppose we are passionate about these products. We believe that they should be created and should be out there on the market, and we're hoping that that passion will flow over onto our potential consumers and that they'll buy into our products, which thankfully we're in 16 different international markets around the world, and we're quickly gaining a reputation as some of the most best premium single malt vodkas, single malt gins and whiskies, single malt whiskies, or vodka, gins and whiskies in the world. So thankfully it's going well and it's being well received. Our innovation, our creativity, or just our general madness.
So on to question 4. Now the good stuff. What are we drinking?
So we had the world's first peated vodka for our last drink. For this drink, we are having the world's first ever seaweed-influenced whiskey. So what we are drinking is Corry single malt Irish whiskey, Atlantic Kombu seaweed cask finish. So what we do here, Tim, is we take Atlantic Kombu kelp seaweed from the west coast of Ireland that has been sustainably hand harvested for us by a family called the Talty family, who are fourth generation seaweed harvesters. What they do is they have an old fish smokehouse nestled on the cliffs in County Clare, where they completely dry out the seaweed for us. We then take this dried kombu seaweed down to West Cork Distillers in Skibbereen, where we contract distill all of our products. And what we do is we use this kombu kelp seaweed to char the inside of virgin American oak casks, using the kombu seaweed as the fuel source. So we turn the cask on its side, and we put the seaweed in 0.5 kg allotments. We light the seaweed on fire, and what we do is we then roll the casks and let them rotate so that the seaweed fire and smoke circulate throughout the entire interior of the cask, giving us a uniform char. So we repeat this process 6 times per cask, taking roughly about 30 to 35 minutes to char each individual cask, which would be a lot longer than most casks would take to char. So prior to being in this seaweed charred cask, our whiskey is made using 100% Irish malted barley. It is triple distilled using the Rocket still in West Cork, the copper pot stills down there. And then we finish it in, or we mature it or age it in first fill bourbon casks, and then take it out of those first fill bourbon casks and finish it for 3 to 4 months in our umami-laden, seaweed-charred Virgin American oak casks. And what you get is this beautiful union of the Irish land and sea between the Irish malted barley and the Irish seaweed coming together beautifully. So, a very unique and interesting whiskey for you.
Cheers.
Right away, that smell, I don't know if you've ever been I've been around the west coast of Ireland too much, Tim, but it takes me back to my summer holidays on the beach down in Allahees in West Cork. The aromas are just beautiful and maritime, but what you see on the palate is, it's quite democratic. It's very much an Irish whiskey up front with all those toffees, vanillins, caramels. Mid-palate, you see the seaweed starts to kick in. There's this fascinating earthiness, Arabic roast coffee. There's a soft caramel, there's a dark chocolate, there's rich fruits, and it's the back end of the palate and the finish just in your mouth now. You should be getting this salty, iodine-y, maritime style characteristic. This is where it really kicks in, but it marries beautifully with this savory, umami style flavor characters. This is just so much fun, seeing people's reactions and tasting it out with people. Someone said koji to me the other day, another person said nushi to me the other day, people are saying sesame seeds. We're getting all different flavor characteristics going back at us, but it really is, everyone who tasted it is kind of in agreement that this is probably one of the most unique whiskies ever produced.
Oh, absolutely. Like I get, for some reason, because I get that caramel and like the dark chocolate, and then the seaweedy at the end. Like for me, it's very sea urchin like it's very Japanese for that like just that butteriness of like just a really great sea urchin. Like it just
sea urchin. That's a first.
Oh yeah, well maybe it's just me, but it definitely just has that butteriness of like this like, and the salt in the sea is just it's so good.
Yeah, I left mine air there now for about an hour, and I'm getting completely different flavor characteristics than I've ever gotten. Buttery, as you said there, I'm getting a really buttery, salty, almost similar to popcorn, but a more maritime popcorn. Almost like a sea salt popcorn that had been left kind of sit by the sea breeze on a beach in West Cork. So, well, this is actually my first time today. I never really got this beautiful buttery characteristic that I'm getting today, which has been fascinating me, and it's even enhanced this drink even more for me. If I didn't love it already enough.
On to question 4.
Yes.
I know, again, you touched a little bit about it. You were at a trade show, but like, what made you go that seaweed route?
We kind of drew inspiration from the culinary world. I know seaweed has always been used in Japanese cuisine and Japanese cooking, but it's becoming far more prevalent in Irish cooking, and a lot of the Michelin star restaurants around Ireland all have some kind of dish using seaweed as an ingredient to kind of enhance and accentuate their dish. And one thing that we noted from the Irish culinary world is that seaweed in its raw state can be quite pungent, quite oily, quite fishy, but seaweed when it's roasted or seaweed when it's cooked releases these completely different flavor characteristics and aromas. And this kind of set us thinking, So we'd already used a very innovative technique with our Kalak Peat Cask single malt vodka to influence the vodka with peat by peating the casks. So we got this idea of why not try roast kombu, or essentially char the inside of casks using kombu seaweed, because kombu, when it's roasted, releases these stunning dark fruits, chocolatey, salted caramel, savoury, umami style characteristics that you don't get off kombu when it's raw state. And see if when we char the casks, when you finish our whiskey in those casks afterwards, does that beautiful roast kombu, savoury, chocolatey, sweet, fruity style aromas and flavour characteristics follow through into the whiskey. Because we looked at Irish whiskey, and Irish whiskey with toffees, caramels, vanillins, you know, that panders beautifully to the style of flavour characteristics that you get from roast kombu seaweed, that Arabic roast coffee, that salted caramel, that dark chocolate. We thought those flavour characteristics would just combine and be a beautiful union and create a stunning whiskey.
It's an experience to drink it. Like, it literally, like every sip is something different. So like it is literally just a true journey of just sitting here and sipping. And like you said, like I've just let it sit, and it keeps changing and changing. So it's amazing.
And a little sneak peek for your viewers and listeners, Tim. So within the next year, we would hope to bring out 2 further Corry single malt Irish whiskey releases, all from different seaweed varietals. So our first release was kombu seaweed, which is a brown seaweed, kombu kelp. Our next 2 releases, which will be out within the next year, one comes from the green seaweed family, and the other comes from the red seaweed family. So we take the exact same virgin American oak casks. The only difference is that we're charring them with different seaweed varieties, taking the same single malt base and putting them into these casks for the exact same amount of time. And the flavour characteristics and aromas we're getting from each whiskey is so starkly different. It's absolutely fascinating. The one of the seaweed varieties adds this really briny, iodine-y, Scotch-style, Talisker-style characteristic. The other seaweed variety adds this really interesting, savoury, salty, almost like the skin on roast chicken. When you're having a roast chicken dinner in your mother's on a Sunday, that's kind of savoury, salty style characteristic comes true in the whiskey, which is something I never thought I'd be talking about in terms of tasting notes for an actual whiskey. So those 2 releases, they were due out actually in 2020, but because of all the things that have been going on with restrictions in relation to COVID-19, they've been pushed back to 2021. But a little sneak peek for your listeners and viewers, those will be coming out. And I think that'll really showcase Corry as a whole when you can actually taste different varietals side by side and see the actual differences and nuance between them.
Been waiting for, so on to question 5. What are we drinking?
Yeah, so as I touched on a minute ago, we really had no idea when we set out in this exploration of enhancing an Irish single malt whiskey with seaweed, would it actually work? And the whiskey that you're actually tasting here in drink number 5 comes from the actual very first test cask we ever used to check out our idea of seeing could we influence and enhance an Irish whiskey using kombu seaweed. And kombu seaweed was the first seaweed varietal we actually explored. So we actually had a less nuanced technique on this whiskey as opposed to our commercial release. With this whiskey, what we actually did is we simply plonked a virgin American cask upright and put 10 kg worth of seaweed inside into the cask, got a flamethrower and lit it, and just went at it and at it and at it. And even at that stage, I was standing beside the cask. I wasn't picking up much aromas. We really weren't sure if our idea actually worked. So what we did is we took the seaweed out of the cask, put the Irish single malt whiskey into it, and we didn't make it down to the distillery after 1 month. We got samples sent to us, and we really weren't tasting much. It hadn't changed the whiskey much at all, and it was only 1 month of aging. 2 months, on the anniversary of 2 months of the whiskey going into the cask, we went down to West Cork Distillers, and I can still remember myself and Patrick in the warehouse. We were nearly shaking because we'd invested a bit of money at this stage. We had different casks laid down. We hopes and dreams here that this would really enhance and bring on the whiskey, and we'd have a viable product that we could bring to market. And I remember that moment when we tasted it after 2 months. From this cask, the whiskey that came from this cask that you're tasting here in our Corry single malt Irish whiskey, Atlantic kombu seaweed cask, founder's cask, single cask, cask strength edition, only 240 bottles ever released. When we tasted this after 2 months of aging, we just had a eureka moment. We said, we're onto something. This doesn't just change the whiskey or add a quirky element to it. It really enhances it, accentuates it, lifts it up, and brings it on to another level. So this whiskey, as opposed to our commercial release, we actually left it in cask for 3.5 months. After 3 months, we felt that we'd kind of gotten all of the seaweed style characteristics and flavors from the cask that we possibly could. And after 3 months, what we were starting to get was more of that charred oak style characteristics, flavor characteristics, similar to say a Jameson Blackburn style characteristics, more char style flavors, and which were starting to overpower the seaweed a little bit. So with our commercial release, we chose to only age it for 3 months, whereas this was aged for 3.5 months. And a commercial release, we only used about 3 kg of seaweed per cask, and as I said, there was a completely different charring technique. It was put on its side, seaweed was put in 0.5 kg allotments, and we rolled it, whereas with this, we just plunked 10 kg worth of seaweed into the cask and charred the hell out of it with a flamethrower. So slightly different, and there's different nuances on the palate of this one, but to be honest, Tim, this would be my desert island whiskey, and I hate when I hear people from individual companies say that their own product would be their desert island whiskey, but I've tasted this against the official Best Irish Whiskey of the Year 2019, the official World Whiskey of the Year 2019. I've yet to find a whiskey that I enjoy more personally myself. Now I know I have an affiliation to it, but I just think this is absolutely stunning. A really unique, interesting whiskey. I don't think it's as forward in terms of the actual seaweed. I think it's slightly more balanced, a higher ABV. It's oily. This actually, again, reminds me of, say, a Middleton from the 1990s. It's got that real oily style characteristic. It's really rich. It's got so many different flavour characteristics. And then you get that maritime influence on the back end, which just constantly take it on to another level. So yeah, a very special whiskey here, Tim. And hopefully this will be seen, this whiskey here in particular will be seen as a piece of Irish whiskey history, because it is, the whiskey in this glass and in these bottles are the first whiskey to have ever been influenced by seaweed in any way, shape or form, or drawn from the first cask and was ever influenced by seaweed in any way or form. So a very historical whiskey.
No, and I agree with you, because like this is just a fucking stunner. Like this is just really a beautiful, beautiful whiskey. And it's very sad that there's only 200 bottles of this, because I should have gotten more when I had a chance.
Yeah, it's. I think there's 20 bottles left on sale in Ireland. I think Irish malts have about 10, and I think Celtic whiskey have about 10 bottles left. So anyone who is listening in who'd like to pick up a bottle, grab it fast, because I'd say it'll be gone very, very soon.
Yes. I can tell you they'll probably be 9 after, as soon as we're done with this. So, like this. I mean, honestly, like this is just really one of the. I mean, I agree with everything you just said. Like it literally is just. I mean, you get that, the butter, the salt, like this is just a really great whiskey. And then now, like going from the first, like the vodkas to the gins up, like this is just like it even more just has just really opened up. Like you just get it all over the tongue now. Like it just everything, it just pops so much, and it just it's fucking just amazing. It really is. Like it just on that note, let's get to question 5.
Oh yeah, Jesus, I gotta flip. This coin is hard to flip.
Yep. So, question 5 comes the flip of the coin. You can spin it, you can flip it, you can do whatever you want. But as a guy that has spent 2 years in Chicago, does a hot dog have ketchup?
I know what my answer would be, and I want to answer it, but we'll let fate answer that question. This says fuck no.
Excellent.
And I would actually, even though I live in Chicago, I would be of the opinion that hot dog should be with mustard.
Steve, thank you so much for joining us. 5 drinks or midnight. We 5 questions down, 5 drinks.
It's nearly midnight in Ireland.
I was gonna say it's almost midnight, so we're gonna cut her a night. Thank you so much. Till we can drink in person.
Tim. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers.